Today, I am so excited to welcome Ali Rheaume to Hope Survives podcast. So glad to have you today, Ali.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, it's great to have you back. So for our listeners out there, you may recognize Ali from an episode of season 1 of the podcast. She was on our episode called Re-Injuries and Flare-Ups and Combating Fear. And she talked about some of her journey and having sustained multiple brain injuries and some of how to deal with the fear in coping through that. And so if you missed that, make sure to go back and check that out. But today we're here for a different conversation. Ali is going to be our special guest on creativity today. And the reason that I invited Ali is because she's one of the most creative people that I know in the brain injury community. And Ali, what I love about you is you are not just creative in your art, like in your visual art and, what people would typically think of as creativity, but you're also creative in your mindset towards recovery and the way that you approach your days and the way that you approach other people. And you just seem to have this beautiful, creative way of thinking. So I am really excited to dive into this with you today.
Oh my goodness, me too. And I love what you just said, and I'm excited to talk about it, how creativity isn't just painting, right? There's so many things that can be considered creative. So absolutely, let's go for it.
All right, so let's just start out. Can you introduce a little bit about yourself? I know some of you guys might also recognize Ali from her Instagram. She posts a lot of really great things on brain injury recovery. She has 2 accounts. She has her Ali Rheaume account, her account. She also has one called Embracing Unique, which is her art account. So I don't know, do you want to just kind of introduce yourself? I know you're also affiliated with the Brain Injury Association, so...
Sure. So yes, so I'm Ali. I'm from Massachusetts. And as Christabel mentioned, I do a lot on Instagram. I like writing and doing these creative videos and whatnot for advocacy for brain injury, but then also multiplying hope and helping people turn their mourning into dancing and having that mindset aspect of recovery. And then I am associated with the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts as well as America. And I additionally work for Concussion Compass as their community manager.
That's awesome. So do you want to share a little bit about your brain injury journey and how creativity has played into it?
Oh boy, yes, do I.
You're like, I can't wait. Where do I
start? Well, it's so exciting for me because I love encouraging other people to do it as well. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today. And I'll start with the basis of my story, where February 28th, 2016 is when I sustained the first TBI that really shifted my life. But I like to rewind a little bit because prior to that, I was an elementary school PE teacher, a high school coach, a kids ministry director, a Zumba instructor, a stand-up paddleboard instructor. So I did all of these roles that were really embodying teaching. And within that, I never really thought of those things being creative. Of course, choreographing dancing for Zumba is creative. Coming up with lesson plans for the students is creative. Making posters for the gym, for the kids, or, even just figuring out how do I creatively run a meeting with a bunch of adults as a director of a kids ministry. There's creativity in all of that. I didn't really see it as that before, though. I kind of just did it because it was natural to me. And after sustaining TBI in 2016, there were 2 of them. The first one, I was struck in the face by a steel commercial door, and I sustained a concussion, and it knocked me off my feet, took me off track. I wasn't working anymore. And while I was home, I had a lot of quiet time. So I ended up doing a whole bunch of organizing, which again, I didn't think of creative at the time, but it's creativity to organize things. I reorganized my clothes and I created a beautiful poster that says, I am, with a bunch of positive affirmations around it. And there we go. Creativity, right? I don't even remember doing those things. I just know because there's pictures of them.
Is that the poster that's behind you?
It is,
in the
yes.
video. So if you're listening to this on like a podcast platform, you are not going to be able to see it, but we do have a video version that'll be on YouTube, and I'm seeing this, and it's beautiful. This guy says "I am." There's a circle, and there's like all these colors coming out from it.
Yes. So it is behind me for anyone that's watching. It's right over here. And as Christabel said, the middle says I am. It says I am what I am by the grace of God. And then surrounding it is positive affirmations. And I feel like this poster is a beautiful example of how creativity is just embedded in someone. Because again, I don't remember making it at all. It's just a product that I have, and I've kept it over the past few years. I've kept it since 2016 when I made it because it's so special to me. But something simple like that, creative, and putting it into a positive spin on it. So yes, that is behind me. And I'm an advocate for having inspirational things around the house too. So that was at the beginning of 2016 as I was recovering from concussion initially. And then at the end of 2016, I sustained another TBI and had a medication reaction and ended up in the hospital. So if we look at this picture of going from really active creativity, really active teaching, all of that, to then being in a hospital bed at a 10% functioning level, my journey with creativity absolutely shifted. So it became a little bit more of a passive engagement of creativity. And I really look forward to continuing to chat about that as well.
So it was after that next TBI that you ended up in the hospital.
Correct. So at that point, which is the end of 2016, really, I say that's like January of 2017, I was in a hospital bed at a 10% functioning level, unable to speak and walk or do anything by myself. So at that point for me, creativity was writing on a piece of paper what I was trying to say, writing on a piece of paper to make a note for my physical therapist who was coming in at the time. Like, to me, that was my creativity, because otherwise my functioning was very limited.
Can you share a little bit of your recovery journey from there?
Absolutely. So at the beginning of 2017, when I was in the hospital at that 10% functioning level, I then went to inpatient rehab for a month. And when I was there, I actually was kind of sad because I didn't get to participate in therapeutic recreation at that point. And like, as we're talking about creativity today, I love engaging in these like artsy, really creative activities. And I was like, oh, I want to do this so bad. But I was at such a poor functioning level that we weren't able to put it into my schedule. Like, my other therapies really took precedence over that. So I spent a month rehabbing back to being able to eat again and walk and shower and all those simple daily life tasks. I also at that point started to color in kids' coloring books, which like I laugh at, but it's where I started in my rehab journey of getting back to this creative component. And it took a lot for me to even pick out a color of a crayon or pick out a color of a pencil to put it to paper. It drove me bananas if there were a lot of lines in the coloring pages. So I didn't do adult coloring pages. I did really simple kids coloring pages, like a teddy bear holding a heart. So that's where I was at the beginning of 2017. So once I got discharged from rehab and went back home, I was only home for a month. And then I ended up back in the neuro ICU. Unfortunately, my body shut down again. And I was back in the hospital for a couple of months. I finally ended up going back home again, and I moved home to my parents' in-law apartment. So I moved into this empty apartment. Now you can imagine someone who is creative walking into a completely empty apartment and being like, we need something here, right? But again, I was at such a minimal functioning level. It's like, what do you do to engage your mind at that point? I was like, what can I do with 5 minutes of energy? And for me, it was immediately, I was like, I need to hand letter some inspirational quotes, add a little color to it, and put it on the wall. And that was one of the first things I did when I got home. So again, reflecting back to this concept of having something creative, but also inspirational at the same time. And from that point forward, I've really just spent a lot of time rehabbing back and going from that 10% functioning level and nonverbal to where I am today.
That's amazing. So creativity has been a huge part of your journey, whether you think of it as the traditional art creativity, but also just that mindset. So do you want to talk about what it means to have a creative mindset in recovery?
Ooh, absolutely. This was important for me in particular because I felt like if I woke up and just looked at my schedule and was like, oh, I have PT and OT and speech, and what do I have to eat to have proper nutrition? If I saw all those things as tasks, I really wasn't motivated to do them. But when it comes to adding a creative component to it, it could be as simple as adding different colors to my plate on a nutrition aspect. It's like putting art on a plate, right? Or with rehab, we started to take components of things that I really enjoyed doing and applying them to the rehab. So for example, there was one time I had occupational therapy around Christmas time, and we decided, hey, why don't we try to hang up Christmas lights as part of our task? So it was still occupational therapy, but it was also doing something fun and creative, and it looked good. And so I feel like there's that active physical creativity where you can participate in things that are fun and exciting. And maybe if you're someone who loves music, adding music in. If you love theater and acting, maybe that comes into rehab. But then also from that mindset perspective, really shifting, no, this is not just a task, right? This is something I get to do. And focusing on, well, how am I going to be able to apply myself to these rehab activities in a way that I enjoy doing them?
I love that mindset of this is something I get to do. I think when you have a TBI, there's just this like overarching fatigue that can just eat away at you every single day. And it's hard to find a sense of joy or purpose in what you're doing. But being able to look at the things that you need to do with a flexible mindset. You know, when I think of creativity, I think of a flexible mindset of realizing this isn't just something that I just have to do, I have to do. And also kind of realigning priorities. I think that's creative too. You know, you talk about planning and pacing, and that is kind of having a creative view of your day or of your week. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I'm super passionate about this. So I'm so glad you brought it up. Planning and pacing and just scheduling in general. I love adding creativity into this because it really motivates me to balance myself out a little bit more, maybe find more of a rhythm, right? And rhythm is even creativity. So here's a few things that I like to do that I feel like could help a lot of people. One is that I add color to my schedule. So I actually visually have a wall calendar, not just on the screen, but even on the screen, this is possible, is color coding activities for the day and for the week. So if social things are in black and medical are in red, and anything I'm doing virtually is in green, and so on and so forth, what do those colors look like on this visual schedule, right? Like if you're painting and you have a palette of 5 colors, is your goal to use all 5 colors, right? Or is your goal to have this monotone painting? And so if my goal is to have a monotone schedule that's all medical, it's going to look pretty boring, honestly. And so in one aspect, it helps me to realize, oh, wait a minute, I have too much red on my calendar. That's way too much medical. Maybe I can try to move some things around and toss in some black. Let's splash some black in there because that's my social life. And there's a lot of black. There's a lot of social life. But how am I doing with keeping up with things like video calls or or work related tasks, and where's that color, and how balanced, or what does that picture of things look like? So yes, creativity in scheduling and finding a rhythm, and I don't think there's ever a true balance in life, but equaling out some of that color. But then on a daily basis, the other thing that I really love to do, that I find almost like dancing every day, is switching back and forth between cognitive tasks and physical tasks, right? It's like a dance all day is, do something cognitive for a few minutes. And then when I feel that cognitive fatigue coming on, switch it up, change the track, go do something physical for a certain amount of time, and kind of go back and forth with those things.
Yeah, I love that. I love how in the visual sense, color coding your calendar helps you to keep a balanced schedule and, creatively putting in different colors. I love that because it's really easy to get kind of off balance. And of course, that would look different for anyone. But I was reading this book by Christy Wright. It's called Take Back Your Time. And she talks a lot about balance. And she says, I can't remember exactly how she says it, but the overarching message was that being off balance is because you're not doing enough of the right things. It's not that you're necessarily doing too much when you're off balance. It's that, it can be that you're doing too much, but it's that you're doing too much of the wrong things and not enough of the right things, the things that really make your soul come to life. And so, wrong and right, I don't know if that's exactly the word she uses, but, when we think about, like you said, like, oh, I have too many medical appointments. Well, these are necessities, right? But if you have absolutely zero social life, you're going to get depressed. You're going to get lonely. Your mental health is going to suffer. Or if you're spending so much time on medical appointments and with your social life, and you don't have any alone time to pray or to, just listen to music or to just kind of be with yourself and to just process and maybe do art or do something creative. If you don't have any of that time, then you're going to feel off balance, even though your time with your friends is good. But for those of us with brain injuries, it does suck out cognitive energy. So we have to be even more careful how we spend our time and even more aware of what we're using our energy in. So when I think of creativity and recovery, I think of this like flexibility, when I think of creativity, I almost think of it as like permission to fail, permission to try. I don't know if fail's the right word, but there's no wrong way to be creative. So if you're an artist, right, and you're taking paint to a canvas, there's no wrong way to paint. There's no wrong way to be creative. If you're writing a song, there's no wrong way to come up with a lyric. There's no wrong way to write poetry. There's no wrong way to express your creativity. And sometimes we edit ourselves before we even allow the creativity to flow. Ooh, so yes. Like we edit it in our mind thinking of what are other people going to think of this? Or is this not going to be good? Or is it going to be what this or that? And I encourage you, if you are listening to this, grab a set of Crayola watercolors from the dollar store, like there you can get or from anywhere, like the drugstore or whatever. Get some watercolors or get some crayons and just put some colors to a piece of paper and just express yourself and don't edit it before it comes out. Because I find that creativity, it's more about the process than it is about the end result.
Oh, absolutely. And again, Christabel, you are just hitting all these big passion areas with me right now today. And this is absolutely something I love to encourage other people with as well, because it was a barrier for me. If I'm being completely honest, prior to TBI, I definitely lived a life of I was so driven. I really wanted things to be done in this perfect way, right? If I do it perfect at first, I won't have to go back and do it again, or just this level of perfectionism that I feel like sustaining a TBI helped release me from that. Almost okay, I had a TBI. It's like this reboot button. Nope, I don't have to be perfect anymore. And I love to look at it as perfectly imperfect. Every time I do art now, if I know what I want it to look like in my mind, but it may not be coming across that way on the paper or the canvas, or if I'm embroidering, on the material I'm using. Maybe that's for a reason, right? So to let myself go there. And I can't tell you how many times I did watercolor and I accidentally dropped a piece of the, dropped a bit of the color, I'll say, on the piece of paper in the wrong spot. And I would immediately be like, oh no, right? But then I was like, wait, why don't I just splash more color on there? And or edit that area in a different way. And I feel like allowing ourselves to enter that creative flow, as you said, this unedited way of expressing yourself, not only does it create art, but it also creates this space to process emotion and feelings. And I'm a huge advocate of the fact that not all art, and whatever you want to define that as, it could be any form of creativity. So whatever, it could be gardening, it could be engineering, it could, whatever you like to do for creativity. Not all art has to be sold. Some of it just has to be made. And I think that's another big barrier that we can come across is like, oh, well, what's the point of doing this if I'm not going to sell it? Or what's the point of doing this if no one's going to see it? Well, the point is that you are sitting down and you're allowing yourself that creative space and that flow and that mental capacity that is so unique to art and creativity. You don't find anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. And it's so healing. It's so healing. There's been a lot of studies on art, and I read one recently on crafting and how it helps the brain, that repetitive motion of like knitting or something like that, and how it's really good for your brain. So there's the real benefits to creativity, but I also think it just gives us a minute to slow down. It takes us out of our busy life and out of all of our appointments and everything, and to just sit down and do something, whether, like, I'm a songwriter, so for me, creativity often comes in the form of music. I didn't play guitar before my brain injury. I never wrote a song before my brain injury. And so that was something that was new after my brain injury. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, but I don't have any creative skills, or I'm not an artist, or I'm not a musician, try. It doesn't hurt to try. And, even just starting with like coloring books, like Ali was talking about, there's something about the process of doing something creative with art that just takes you out of yourself for a little bit and just kind of, it's therapeutic. And that process can really help. And you might discover a talent that you didn't know that you had.
Yes, that, and it's okay to try different mediums too of expressive creativity. So very similar to what Christabel was just sharing in her relationship to music, that's how I was with the actual type of art of like sit down and paint and draw and whatnot. Because as I explained at the beginning, my creativity was very active before, very, teaching, lesson plans, all this literally physically active creativity. And then after slowing down because of the TBI, it's the first time in my life I ever allowed myself that quiet space. And in doing so, of course, I was like, well, what do I do with this space? Because it's so unfamiliar to me. And so many people out there are looking to have a break in their day or time to just sit down and relax. But they're like, I don't want to just watch TV all the time, right? So what do I do with that? Well, as we're saying, grab some watercolor, grab a pencil, grab whatever is near you and allow your mind to create something. Because once I started to sit down and experiment with different types of mediums, I had no idea that I had the ability to paint watercolor or do embroidery. I had never done either of those things in my life. And when I had ended up back in rehab at one point in my journey. And the second time I went to rehab inpatient, I did get to do therapeutic recreation. And I was so excited. One day we were planting seeds, another day, maybe we did a puzzle. And then one day she gave me these watercolor pencils. And at first I was like, oh, okay, whatever, these colored pencils. And it was really cool because you do color like colored pencils, but then you add water and it's like it turns it into that watercolor. And I was so intrigued by it that when I went back home after rehab, I called up my aunt because she's my art go-to person in my family. I was like, Auntie, I'm going to need some watercolor and some paper and some paintbrushes. Like, what do you got? What can you hook me up with? And for the first time in my life, I sat down and actually painted. And I didn't know I had that ability until I tried. Now, I've done that with other mediums too, and they really weren't a fit for me. So that's the other thing I want to encourage is it's also okay to try. And if you're not really excited about it, you don't have to do that. Try something else. I don't consider that a failure either. I think we're all wired differently to either enjoy different things or have those different types of creativity.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And like Ali was saying, if it's not a fit, then that's okay. It doesn't mean that you failed, right? So like trying is what creativity is about. So we've covered a lot in this. We've talked about creative expression as far as like art, trying something new, but also like Ali said, your daily life, your daily tasks. She talked about organizing her closet, how that was creative for her. And I think the way that we approach life after brain injury, because everything's been shaken up and we've had a lot of things taken from us, that being able to approach our life with a creative mindset is a way to help us cope too. Like it helps us to learn how to be a little bit more flexible because we know that life can be shaken up in an instant. And we know that better than most people, that life can just be shaken up and things can be one way one day and the next day completely different. And so what creativity does is having this creative outlet, creative mindset, it kind of creates a little bit more flexibility in our heart, in our mind, and helps us to breathe a little easier.
I totally agree with you, Christabel. And again, if I even use this analogy of, say, dancing, right? If you're choreographing a dance and you're just starting to learn a dance or engage in that dance, if you mess a step, are you going to stomp your feet and quit dancing forever? Or are you going to be like, okay, I'll practice again and I'll practice again? Or maybe eventually you're like, well, I tried ballet and I kind of prefer jazz, right? So if we approach that to mindset, I totally agree with you that even mindset is like dancing and we kind of have to go with the flow, and there's the ups and the downs and the rhythm of it. And if we miss a step, we can pick back up, we can try again, or we can pick a different genre and realize that there's always this ebb and flow of us really experimenting with things and reminding ourselves that, like art, we're never perfect. Like we just have to put things to paper, and one day it might be painting watercolor, another day it might be acrylic, another day forget the painting, you're dancing, another day forget the dancing, you're out in the garden. And the same thing with our rehab activities and with our attempts to return to anything in life, to work, to social life. And then again, that mindset, all of it is this, okay, I'm going to try this, see how it goes. I'm going to adapt. And if this isn't working out, I'll let myself be in that moment for a minute, feel all the feels from it, and then somehow release it. And I just feel like it's this beautiful picture of all of that tying in together.
Yeah, I love how you express that. So here on Hope Survives podcast, I love to just bring our listeners tangible hope. And so how does creativity tie into hope for you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Creativity ties into hope for me as something that reminds me I don't ever have to be perfect. And that day to day, I have the ability to change and adjust. And if something's not going the way that I expected it to, that I am adaptable and that I can change and I can go with it. And it may be a different picture in the end, but it's still art.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, what is a final word of encouragement that you would have for our listeners today?
I would say to take a step. Take one step, whatever whether it was this episode of this podcast that you were just listening to, or anything else in your life that you've had on your heart, go take one step with it. Because I feel like a lot of times we may tend to overthink it or overplan it. And all we need to do is take that first simple step with it. So that's what I did with art. Just took that watercolor and put it to paper. And I think we can all do that with various things in our life. So pick one thing, take one step, and simply start it without expecting the end result yet, or without waiting for permission for somebody. Just go start.
I love it. Just start. That's beautiful. So, Ali, how can people get in touch with you? We talked about your Instagrams. We didn't mention Clubhouse. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes. So Clubhouse is another social media app that's kind of like if you combine Zoom and a podcast together. Christabel and I and one other friend of ours run a topic-based room that we run for 1 hour. And there's a whole bunch of people that come join us, and it's a verbal conversation. There's no video involved. But say if the topic is creativity, we talk for an hour with each other about what that looks like in our lives. And yeah, we different topic every week. We've been doing it for almost a year now.
Yeah. And the club on there is called Brain Injury Community. So if you look up Ali or myself on there, you'll find it. And yes, so Ali, people can get in touch with you on your Instagram. I'll put the links in the description. And I highly recommend following her. She's so inspiring and encouraging. And I know that this podcast was any indication of the amount of, it's only scratched the surface of how much you have to offer and how much you have to share. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast today. And yeah, anything else you want to share?
Well, thank you for having me. And to everyone listening, thank you for taking the time to listen. And if anyone does feel really inspired to go start something new, whether it be art or anything else, please feel free to reach out and message me and let me know, because I love celebrating with people. And you could literally take a marker and draw a line on a piece of paper, and I will have a party with you. So if you start something new, let me know, and I'm there with you. But thank you all for joining, and thank you, Christabel, for having me today.